Okay, so now the second concept that is the most important concept that should be considered as the yield to maturity. Okay, and the calculation of the yield to maturity. So let's talk about yield to maturity. That is the most accurate measure to reflect the interest rate. So for our simple loan example that we reviewed before, yield to maturity for the first year is exactly equal to interest rate. So this yield to maturity for the simple loan example for first year is exactly equal to interest rate. So the loan is 1,000, and if the yearly payment is, for example, 126, okay, so the loan, imagine similar to what we had before. Currency unit. And yearly payment, let's say, is 126. And we are supposed to pay it for what? For next 25 years. Okay. So here with this 1,000 as the amount of loan, we want to calculate the yield. Okay, so what we have here as the discount for the first year, 126, that is the yearly payment over this one plus the amount of the interest. And it would be plus for the second year, the similar payment, because the payment is fixed to 126 over what? For the second one, it would be to the power of 2. And for the third one, we will have this 126 over 1 plus interest 3, and for the year 25, we will have what? 1 plus I 25. Okay. So very simple, similar to what we had before for the present value and the future value. So we can make a formula here to calculate it by considering the different years. This is for a simple loan. It's a very simple example, but the idea is like this, right? So what we can say is that the loan value that we have here as this 1,000, okay? So let's say the loan value is equal to what? is equal to the yearly payment. So the fixed yearly payment over what? 1 plus I plus the fixed yearly payment to the fixed yearly payment over 1 plus I to the power of n, that is n is what? The number of years until maturity. Okay. So if we have a bond, for example, consider that we have a currency unit bond here, okay? With an amount. And this 1,000 currency unit as the par value with 5% of what? Right? For 3 years. Okay. So for year 0, what would happen? We will have this 1,000. So for year 1, so first we have this much as the value of the bond for the year 1. Because of the buying of this bond, we will receive 5% of this 1,000. It means 50 currency unit. For year 2, we will have more 15 currency unit. Okay, that they are what? The annual coupons. And then finally, in the last year, as the number of years are 3, so this is the last year, we will receive what? We will receive the not only the annual coupons, so plus what? The par value. So it will be 1,000 plus this 50. Okay, so this is the payment that we will receive at the year 3 maturity of this one. Okay, so for yield to maturity, we can say that this 1,000 bond with 5% of the coupon rate. So this as the par value, this as the coupon rate, and the time of three years. As the maturity date. The bond price can be calculated by the coupon okay over what? Over the yield to maturity with different overs by time, by the different years. So for the second year, it will be 1 plus yield to maturity over 2. Okay. And for the third year, it would be what? The coupon plus the par value that we have here. Okay. Par value 1 plus yield to maturity to the power of 3. So if we want to calculate it, for example, for this one with the 5%, the bond price is 1,000, with the 1,000 equal to what? The coupon. And the coupon plus the par value over the 1 plus 5%. Great. Okay. So the relation that we have here between the bond price and the coupon rate is important because this relation is the opposite relation. Okay, so it's very simple. the correlation is negative. And if we have, for example, here a decrease in the bond price, for example, it'd be 950. So everything would be similar here in the formula. Exactly similar, except of this yield to maturity. So the yield would be different, and the yield here that we will have, because the bond price is lower, it would be on the opposite side, so it would be higher, and it would be higher than 5%. So 1 plus yield to maturity, that this yield to maturity is higher than 5%. If we have an increase in the bond price and we see that the bond price is, for example, 1,100, it means that what? We have similar to what we had before, except of this yield here, less than 5%, because the bond price is now higher than the 1,000 that we had as the par value before. So we can say that the bond price and the yield to maturity, they are moving in opposite directions. And this is the important concept that you have to know about the relation between the bond price and the yield that you can expect from that price. Okay, so we can say that the yield to call, the yield to maturity would be changed by the bond price if the current yield is something. Okay, the current yield might be here, might be here, but the yield to maturity might be different and change based on the bond price. So we have the yield to call also, that can be also similar to yield to maturity, the return bondholder receive if the bond is held until the call date, which occurs sometimes before it reaches the maturity. So this is another concept. So this is the way that we calculate the yield to maturity for the bonds, for the simple loans. So you can see that for simple loans, it's very, very simple to be calculated. For the bonds, also we have these formulas, and we can calculate the similar to interest rate for the simple loan, the yield to maturity for the bonds, and the relation that we have between the bond prices and the yield to maturity, and the yield based on the changes that might happen by time. So if we want to have some examples, let's say we have two bonds, okay? So similar to our example, consider two bonds as 1,000 and 1,000, okay? So the question is that which is to 1,000 bonds has the higher yield to maturity if one of them is for 20 years, okay, so 20-year bond, selling for 800, the currency unit, and with the current yield of the current yield 15%, or a 1-year bond selling again for 800 with the current yield 5%. Okay. So if the 1-year bond did not have a coupon payment, its yield to maturity would be what? Would be 1,000 minus 800 over 800. Means what? 200 over 800. 25%. Okay. Since it doesn't have a coupon payment, its yield to maturity must be what? The yield to maturity must be greater than that 25%. But because the current yield is a good approximation of the yield to maturity for a 20-year bond, okay, so we know that the yield to maturity on this bond is approximately 50%. So the yield to maturity, as we have here, is approximately 50%. So the 1-year bond has a higher yield to maturity, and we know that this 25% for this 1 year is better than what we have for the 50% of the bond 2. Okay, so the higher yield is for the 1,000 with 1 year, and with the current yield 5%. Instead of the 1,000 bond for 20 years, and the current yield be 15%. Okay, so the 50% greater than 5%, 25% of the yield to maturity, greater than 50% of the bond 2. Another example, again similar to what we had before. Imagine that now we have also two bonds. So they are the treasury bonds, for example, with the yield to maturity 9%. And we have 1 year again treasury bill. So okay, with yield to discount. Equal to, this is 9%, this is 8.9%. Okay. Which would you rather own to buy from this bond with yield to maturity 9%, or the treasury bill with the yield to discount 8.9%. So the treasury bill is what is the preferable choice. Why? Because it's superior yield to maturity. But the discount yield significantly might underestimate the yield to maturity for 1 year bond, exceeding 1 percentage point differential. So the yield to maturity for the 1 year bill would exceed the 9%. Okay, surpassing the yield to maturity of the 1 year treasury bonds. So comparing between these two, the 8.9% for the treasury bill or the 9% of the bond, we might look at this 9% and 8.9% first to choose the, for example, the treasury bond, but the yield to maturity for 1 year bill might be even exceed this 9% of the treasury bond, and yield to maturity of the 1 year treasury bill might be more interested to be purchased and is more preferable choice than the bonds that we have in this example. Okay.